Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid it felt less like imagination and more like memory? As if the night had handed you a calling and whispered, "Remember this." Picture a woman, mid-storm, lungs full of sea spray and sky, running into a small, dim office in Virginia Beach in 1943. Her hair was soaked. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from certainty. She could not shake the repeated sensation of flying, not the Hollywood, gravity-defying sort, but the quiet, steady lift of a presence that knew where it belonged. She burst through Edgar Cayce's door and said plainly, "I keep being shown myself going over cities and people I love. It feels like a commission." He listened, entered his trance, and the reading that followed pointed to gifts that were not accidental. Vision, guidance, a life that would be shaped by a higher aim. We begin with that story because it asks a question we will return to again and again. Do you have the letter M on your palm? Not as a fortune teller's verdict, but as an interpretive index, a symbol that can help you name a pattern you've been living. Mission, memory, manifestation, ministry, magnetism, mercy. According to the archive of readings attributed to Edgar Cayce, numbers recorded carefully, numbers like reading number 25336 and 13618 among them, recurring emotionally charged dreams often trace out a soul's capacities and callings. If you recognize your life in the pattern, if your nights show you the same terrain, pay attention. This is what Cayce called the soul's language, and it is the language of purpose. If this conversation is touching something inside you, subscribe to follow this series. We'll be exploring case histories from the Cayce archive, practical exercises to cultivate these gifts, and careful, Christ-centered ways to test what you're experiencing. Edgar Cayce was a devout Christian who worked, as he described it, under a kind of inner guidance while resting in a sleep-like trance. He never claimed to have all answers. He claimed to have access to information that, when his body rested and his conscious will softened, seemed to be received for the sake of healing, direction, and spiritual growth. Over 4 decades, the Cayce system produced thousands of readings, medical readings that sometimes suggested therapies consistent with the knowledge of the day, life readings offering vocational and karmic perspectives, and dream interpretations that spoke of patterns beyond single lifetimes. The archives, preserved by the Association for Research and Enlightenment and other custodial bodies, contain reading numbers that researchers and seekers now cite when they want to tie an insight to a documented source. When we say reading number 2629 or reading number 19473, we are pointing you to a place in those archives where Cayce seer's words meet a life narrative.
What makes these readings useful is not that they prove metaphysics, but that for many people, they serve as a template. The suggestion that dreams are not random firings of neurons, but languages of the soul calling you to remember and to act. Cayce spoke of a hall of records, another term for what many traditions call the Akashic records, as a repository of the soul's memory. From that archive, he suggested, impressions can surface in dreams, images, places, faces, symbols that the waking mind often dismisses. For us, 2 things are crucial to keep in mind. First, label the speculative material as such. When we describe Atlantis, past lives, or the Hall of Records, we are describing Cayce's interpretive model, not an empirical fact. Second, remember his ethical center. Cayce framed these faculties within a Christian horizon. Gifts, in his view, were given to serve others and to reflect the creative love he associated with Christ consciousness. Cayce organized dream phenomena into patterns, types of dreams that, when recurring, suggest certain spiritual gifts. Over the next portions of what we'll explore together, we will unpack 7 principal dream types as indicators of activated gifts: flying, visionary and prophetic sensitivity, water, healing and magnetic work, encounters with ancient civilizations, past life memory, often linked in Cayce's readings to Atlantean technology and skill sets, communication with the deceased or spiritual guides, mediumship and counseling, prophetic, future-oriented dreams, dreams wherein the dreamer performs healing in the dream, and dreams with Christ-centric or Christ-conscious encounters. Each type is a thread. In many lives, they weave into one tapestry. Where the M appears on your palm, whether faint, broken, or clear, we will read it not as a deterministic brand, but as an interpretive key that can help you correlate outward signs to inward callings. Let us begin with the dream most often given as the gateway, the flying dream. We use the word flying loosely. For some, it is literal levitation. For others, a sense of perspective rising above mundane detail. In the archive, a woman we will call Margaret, she appears in several readings documented in the 1940s, reported a recurring flight over towns she later felt drawn to visit. She would wake with tears and a steady conviction that the world below meant something deeper than any job description. In reading 3643, Cayce's trance suggested that such dreams can be soul vision, an image of one's capacity to hold larger patterns, to see relationships between people and events. Practically, flying dreams correlate with gifts that include prophetic insight, counseling that pierces confusion, and a capacity to map spiritual territories. If you have these dreams, ask yourself, do I often see patterns others miss? Are people drawn to me for direction at moments when clarity is scarce?
Do you feel a sustained grief or longing when you observe injustice or confusion, not because you are overwhelmed by it, but because you intuit its possibility for healing? These are the outward signs we use to test the inward gift. There is a danger here, however, and Cayce's readings speak to it. Vision without grounded service risks arrogance. We must tether sight to compassion. The Christ-centered note in the archive insists that seeing is not a privilege for its own sake, it is a charge to serve. For someone with a flying dream, an exercise might be immediate and simple. Keep a pattern journal. For a week, write down every time you notice a repeated social or relational pattern: two friends who keep making the same mistake, a system at work that keeps failing, a cultural misunderstanding you feel called to correct. In the margins note, did I feel a burning or a pull? How did I respond? This practice trains the soul to move from passive revelation to active organizing. A short attunement to close the exercise can be as spare as this. In a quiet minute, breathe. Ask for Christ's light to steady your sight. And then ask, aloud or silently, how can I use what I see to help? Keep the question simple. Service may follow. The second dream type is water. Dreams of being immersed, of swimming, diving deep, or encountering flood and current are among the most emotionally charged dreams in the Cayce records. James Thompson, a name that appears in several readings and one of the Cayce vignettes we draw from, reported recurring dreams of standing beside wide rivers, hands submerged, sensing currents of energy moving like living things. Cayce's reading 115111 discusses water imagery as linked to magnetic work. In Cayce's vocabulary, magnetism does not mean occult trickery, but the capacity to move subtle energies for healing, often expressed in what many Christian communities call prayerful laying on of hands, anointing, or presence-centered ministry. In the cases recorded, those who dreamed in water often woke with affirmations. Strangers would seek their touch, inexplicable healings or relief would follow, and the dreamers themselves cultivated a tenderness in the body towards others suffering. Yet again, there's a pastoral caveat. This is not a promise of guaranteed cure. Cayce's readings sometimes suggested physical improvement when the person's life was reoriented towards health, discipline, and ethics. Other times the spiritual gift produced emotional or relational healing rather than a literal medical cure. When we tell James's story, we do so to illustrate process. The dream alerted him to a capacity he could develop through study, trusted mentorship, and modestly disciplined practice, not to prove miraculous outcomes as inevitable. If water dreams recur for you, try a small exercise at the edge of your daily life.
Keep a sensation ledger. When you touch someone, a hand on a shoulder, a brief embrace, note afterward how their face changes, whether tension eases, whether a sense of calm has shifted. This is observational training, not performance. If you feel a call to work in healing spaces, begin with accompaniment. Volunteer at a hospice, sit with someone in prayerful silence, or support a local clinic. The gift is taught through proximity to suffering and through humility. Again, the Archive's moral center insists that healing is sacred because it binds us to others. It is not to be wielded for self-aggrandizement. In reading number 28104, Cayce emphasizes that the heart's posture, love, is the primary channel. The third dream type we encounter early is the dream of ancient places, temples, strange instruments, crystalline structures, or seas that seem to hold technologies beyond modern comprehension. David Kahn's account in Cayce material describes waking images of vast chambers and tools that hummed. Cayce often linked these to past life memories, writing in readings such as number 13646 and number 25468 that some individuals carried skills from epics Cayce named as Atlantis. Here we must be careful. The Cayce model introduces Atlantis and past life group missions as part of his explanatory framework. He did not offer it as mainstream biblical doctrine. He offered it as one way of making sense of recurring skill sets and affinities. When a person dreams of ancient systems and later finds themselves drawn to certain technologies or sound-based therapies, Cayce would interpret this as a memory surfacing, a record in the soul's hall whispering, "You have been here before." For the modern seeker, such dreams can serve a practical purpose. They identify affinities. If crystalline instruments recur in your nights, you may have an aptitude for disciplines that use vibration, music therapy, sound healing, subtle energy work, or pattern-based engineering. Martha Johnson, in readings noted around 1940s files, received recurring visions of temples and later became especially adapted working with tonal, meditative practices that calmed anxiety in others. The test is pragmatic. Does your waking life show a magnetic pull toward a craft or discipline that you did not choose for practical reasons, but that seems to choose you? How to work with this dream type? Start with cataloging. Keep a texture journal of images, materials, stone, crystal, metal, sounds, bell, hum, chorus, light quality, amber, silver, sapphire. Over time, patterns emerge that point to specific training avenues. Seek mentors who bridge the visible and invisible, for example, practitioners who combine clinically informed care with contemplative methods. And as always in Cayce's Christian-inflected frame, link skill to service. The gift of technology or sound is sanctified when deployed for relief, not spectacle.
Now, and this is where the M on your palm motif begins to weave itself more tightly into our work. Consider these three dream types together. The flying dream speaks to vision, the water dream to healing and magnetism, the ancient places dream to skill memory and specialized craft. If you notice an M pattern in your palm lines, you might interpret it as a symbolic flag. M for mission, if your life consistently orients toward purpose. M for memory, if you repeatedly encounter skills and images that feel ancestral. M for manifestation, when your inner congruence translates into outward change. Let us be clear about what we mean by interpretive overlay. Palmistry, in many traditions, reads lines as maps of disposition and potential. We are not asserting that an M is metaphysical proof of a soul's destiny. Rather, we propose a simple heuristic. Use the palm as a starting point for introspection. The symbol can become a catalyst for the soul's remembering. Here is a non-technical way to check. Sit in a quiet place with natural light. Open your dominant hand, palm up. Scan the intersection of the heart line and the headline, often where the classical M is said to form in palm reading traditions. Notice, is there a convergence of lines? Is there a faint crossing that seems to shape the letter? If so, treat it as an invitation. List 5 patterns in your life that persistently show up. Do you see themes of leadership, of healing, of craftsmanship, of teaching, of advocacy? Next, cross-reference these with your dream journal. If you are not yet keeping one, begin tonight. Do your nights present flying, water, or ancient place narratives? Where overlaps occur between your waking callings and nocturnal images, that is fertile ground for exploration. If you find no M, that too is instructive. Many souls carry mission without such markings. The symbol is a cue, not a verdict. While we are on the practical side, let us do a brief attunement suitable for someone who has just begun noticing these patterns. This is short and optional. Use what resonates and discard what does not. Sit comfortably, breathe slowly 3 times, and place your hand over your heart if that feels natural. Say softly, "Christ, steady my sight. Help me to remember what I have been given to do." Pay attention to the first impression that arises, word, color, image, and write it down. If nothing arises, note that calm is also a reply. This simple practice reflects Cayce's repeated insistence that spiritual gifts require readiness. They do not arrive merely by desire, but by a pattern of inner discipline and surrender. Within the archive, there are further case studies that illuminate these patterns. Eleanor Walsh, for instance, encountered prophetic economic images and dreams that later helped her counsel communities through transitional phases.
Robert Chen, whose readings appear under numbers like #19681 in the files, described repeated crystal-clear healing visions that later translated into a ministry of presence among the elderly. Mary Patterson's reports included vivid personal dialogues with those who had passed. Her gifts were most potent when she remained humble and connected to a community of accountability. Each of these lives shows a similar architecture. Dream types sparks curiosity. Disciplined practice, journal, mentorship, service, matures capacity. Service grounds the gift in love. We must pause here to notice the moral through line. Cayce was insistent that gifts given apart from service atrophy. In reading 28113, he frames abilities as instruments that function only when aligned with ethical ends. The overarching Christian tone, the Christ consciousness as the ultimate vibration of love, repeatedly surfaces in readings as the metric by which gifts are tested. Does what you do relieve suffering? Does it build community? Does it increase the capacity for justice and mercy in the circles you touch? These are the questions that will shape whether your M becomes a mark of vanity or of vocation. As we prepare to move deeper into the archive's other dream types, encounters with deceased guides, the prophetic future dream, the healing in dream, and explicitly Christ-centered dream encounters, consider taking 3 small steps tonight. First, begin a dream journal. Keep it by your bedside, note the feeling on waking, and list 2 details before the day erases them. Second, write down 1 area in your life where people seek your counsel, or where you find you offer comfort without trying. That's often a hint of gift. Third, observe your calm without reaching for sweeping conclusions. Treat any letter-like formation as a prompt to reflect rather than a final sentence. There is more to come. In the next sections, we will unpack how dreams that feature deceased loved ones often point toward a calling in mediation and reconciliation. We will examine the powerful but delicate gift of prophetic dreams and how to test their fruit. And we will step into the dreams where the dreamer themselves practices healing and what that means for training, boundaries, and accountability. Most of all, we will bring the M motif back into sharper relief as we trace how memory, ministry, and manifestation interlace through specific case stories and practical curricula. For now, carry this. Whatever patterns you notice, in your dreams, in your hands, in the persistent solicitations of your heart, they are invitations. The archive offers language. You must choose service. The soul's memory will call you toward a life that aligns with the highest vibration of love. When we return, we will meet the dream that most often predicts the ability to heal, and with it, the ethical questions that demand more than technique.
Next, we meet the dream that most often predicts the ability to heal. Dreams in which you are actively helping, tending wounds, or simply being present while another's pain eases. These are not always cinematic healings. The archive is full of small, tender scenes. A hand laid on a fevered brow, a whispered name in a quiet room, a moment when a stranger's breath slows and peace comes. In reading number 19681, Cayce described such nocturnal ministrations as indications that the sleeper is learning to move currents of healing through intention and love. In the case files, Mary Patterson's nights were full of these scenes. She would wake with an ache in her own hands, as if they had been used in the night. As she practiced ethical disciplines, accountability, daily prayer, study, those hands became instruments of accompaniment for hospice patients and for those dismissed by conventional care. If your dreams show you healing, begin with 2 questions. Whom do you feel naturally drawn to comfort, and what boundary do you need so that that comfort does not exhaust you? Healing gifts are double-edged when untempered. They bring deep ministry, and they can draw you into codependence if you do not maintain wise limits. Practical training begins simply. Volunteer for hospice, a hospital chaplaincy, or a pastoral care team where supervision is provided. Learn basic body-centered empathy, how to sit without fixing, how to listen without patching over another's grief. In your dream journal, note the gestures that recur. Are you a hand-on-the-shoulder person? Do you use words, touch, music, or silence? Over months, patterns will suggest a pathway to formal training, not as proof of expertise, but as the necessary scaffolding for safe, effective service. Many practice. After waking from a healing dream, write the 3 smallest details you remember of the scene: a color, a scent, a sentence. Hold those details for a minute and ask, how can small, steady presence be my first practice today? Let that question guide one small action. The 5th dream type centers on encounters with those who have passed, ancestors, guides, or beloved friends offering counsel across the veil. Cayce's readings often treated such dreams as legitimate communications that could be interpreted as guidance or warnings. In reading number 294 and others, the phenomenon is described as part of the soul's ongoing community. Souls do not travel alone. Robert Chen's readings record dreams where departed mentors appeared, giving him technical instruction or compassionate correction. For some people, this gift becomes a ministry of reconciliation, helping families navigate grief, providing counsel, or offering solace in ways that reduce fear about death. There are ethical lines here. Cayce's archive repeatedly emphasizes that mediumship must be rooted in humility and accountability. Messages should be tested by fruit. Do they bring peace? Do they direct people to love, service, and Christ-like transformation?
Never substitute private dream impressions for public doctrinal claims. If you feel called to work in this realm, join a community with oversight, pastors, therapists, or spiritually mature mentors who can help you discern. Keep a criterion list. Messages that contradict God-centered love, that demand secrecy for manipulative ends, or that elevate the dreamer are suspect, regardless of how vivid they are. Practical prompt. When a deceased person appears in a dream, write down the emotion that accompanies them more than the image. Is it relief, shame, urgency? Use that emotion as the primary datum. If the encounter evokes peace, offer that peace outwardly. Visit someone grieving, make a meal, send a note.
The action grounds the spiritual into the social. The sixth type concerns the prophetic dream, images of possible futures, warnings, or symbolic maps of coming seasons. Cayce's material includes prophetic dreams that played integrative roles in social and personal decisions. Eleanor Walsh's economic imagery, for example, helped communities prepare and adapt when resource flows shifted. But prophecy, in Cayce's framing, is context-sensitive. Readings like 25336 explain prophecy as a measure of alignment. The dream reveals a field of probability rather than a textual decree. When prophetic images arrive, the ethical question is always the same. How will this knowledge be used to reduce suffering and increase freedom? Testing prophecy resembles testing fruit in any other ministry. If you receive a warning, seek corroboration in a calm, disciplined manner. Consult trusted peers, pray for confirmation, and test whether acting on the insight serves rather than controls others. Prophecy divorced from humility easily becomes domination. The archive warns against using prophetic gifts to manipulate markets, politics, or relationships. Cayce's ethos is consistently pastoral. Gifts must enlarge love. Mini exercise for prophetic dreams. Write the imagery as a metaphor rather than a headline. If you dream of a burning field, what does fire symbolize in your life? Cleansing, destruction, transformation? Translate the image into an actionable, compassionate question. How can I prepare my family, community to be resilient if this transformation occurs? If action arises that helps others, the prophecy is more likely to be a faithful prompt. The seventh and perhaps most intimate type is the Christ-centered dream, a direct encounter with a Christ figure, a luminous presence, or experiences of unconditional love and call. Cayce, a Christian himself, described these dreams as the apex of spiritual attunement. In readings such as 13618 and 28138, he frequently framed Christ as the highest vibration, the measure by which all other experiences are judged. For many seekers, such dreams are not merely comforting, they are catalytic. They realign priorities, redirect careers, and soften hardened hearts.
If you experience Christ-centered dreams, hold them with gratitude and community. These encounters are gifts meant to root you more deeply in love and service. They are not private trophies. The Christ image in your night should lead you to acts of mercy during the day. Short attunement for Christ-centered dreaming. Before sleep, place a simple intention. May my sleep open me to love that makes me kinder in morning. Keep the intention brief. Rest. Sleep like a child of prayer. Upon waking, note a single action you can do in the day to reflect that love. At this point, it is natural to ask how these dream types correspond to the mysterious M on the palm. Let us expand that symbolic overlay in practical terms, always with the required cautionary note. Reading the palm is an interpretive practice. We present it as a reflective tool that helps you correlate external signs and inner experiences. We do not present it as determinative prophecy. Think of the M as a polysemic emblem, a crossroads where multiple dimensions of call converge. We will map 6 principal meanings that Cayce's framework invites us to consider. 1. Mission. The M can flag vocation. People who naturally organize, who find their greatest fulfillment in purposeful work that serves others, often report feeling that their life bent toward a goal long before they knew how to name it. In Cayce's readings, mission is frequently the thread that ties past life patterns to present-day longing. See reading number 13646 for an example of vocational continuity. 2. Memory. The M can index soul memory, the continuity Cayce described through the Hall of Records. If your interior life houses sudden, detailed affinities, an inexplicable love for an ancient instrument, a language you never learned but dream in, this may be the memory aspect. 3. Manifestation. The M can point to the capacity to make inner alignment produce outer change. Cayce's model of vibrational law suggested that readiness precedes reception. Prayer, discipline, and alignment create the conditions for manifestation. Manifestation here is ethical, not simply getting what you want, but realizing gifts for the good of others. 4. Ministry. A pragmatic reading, M for ministry, argues that the lines might reflect a life bent towards serving communities through organized work, pastoral roles, social care, teaching, healing arts. 5. Magnetism. Cayce often used the term magnetism to describe subtle energetic sensitivity. The M can thus indicate a natural attraction. People come to you. You influence atmospheres pre-verbally. This is not about fame, but about relational influence that can be used to bind and heal. 6. Mercy. Perhaps the deepest reading ties the M to mercy, the disposition to forgive, to act for the vulnerable, to choose compassion where reactivity would be easier. In Cayce's Christ-centered readings, mercy is the highest measure. As you reflect on these 6 meanings, ask, which one feels like home when I say it aloud? You might find that 2 or 3 apply, or that none fits neatly, and that too is meaningful. The whole purpose of the heuristic is to cultivate discernment, not to conclude destiny. Now for a gentle, practical method to examine your palm in symbolic terms, again, non-technical and respectful of tradition. Sit near a window in daylight. Relax your hand, then notice the prominent lines, the heart line, head line, lifeline, and any crossing lines in the mount between thumb and index finger. If those lines converge or form a shape that resembles an M, don't rush to interpretation. Instead, write down 3 things: 1 dream pattern that recurs in your nights, 1 persistent strength you exercise in waking life, and 1 recurrent wound or pattern that still stings. Lay these items beside one another. If mission, memory, or mercy seem to connect 2 or more of them, you have a directional insight worth exploring with prayer and community. We turn now to doctrines in the Cayce corpus that often raise the most questions: reincarnation, Atlantis, and the Hall of Records. These are areas where caution is not timidity, but charity, caution towards truth claims, and charity towards seekers who find these ideas meaningful. Cayce frequently described a model of karmic continuity, souls returning to complete lessons, to develop gifts, and to fulfill group missions. He linked certain affinities and talents to past life experiences, sometimes naming possible cultural or geographic sources, sometimes very specifically referring to an Atlantis narrative. See readings such as 2546.8 and 13646. Within Cayce's theology, reincarnation is not punitive, nor is it a mechanical repetition. It is a schooling of love, an opportunity to learn compassion, responsibility, and service across varied circumstances. For Christians who encounter Cayce's frame, the tension is real. The canonical scriptures do not teach reincarnation as doctrine. For many seekers, Cayce's model is an interpretive overlay. He tried to reconcile miraculous experience with a Christian metaphysic that emphasized love as the ultimate metric. We suggest the following posture. Hold Cayce's reincarnation claims as a hypothesis that can illuminate personal experiences without forcing you to reject central Christian commitments. Ask instead, does the idea of soul continuity help me become more loving and responsible now? If yes, use it as a tool. If not, let it be a curiosity. Atlantis functions in Cayce's writings as a mythic political motif, an account of advanced skill and subsequent moral decline. Cayce's point in invoking Atlantis is ethical. Technologies untethered from love produce ruin. In contemporary terms, it serves as a parable about the moral life of technology and craft.
If you dream of crystalline halls or ancient instruments, you might be encountering the cultural wreckage of a past creativity that lacked a moral center. The remedy in Cayce's readings is the cultivation of conscience. Let the gifts you carry serve mercy. The afterlife in Cayce's descriptions is both intimate and procedural. He recorded many readings about the funeral or transition experience, a review, a gathering of community, a hall of records consultation where a soul sees patterns of its choices and their effects. Readers often recount the life review as an encounter with truth rather than punishment. Christ-like light revealing both wounds and opportunities for repair. Cayce's pastoral note, repeated in readings like 2629, is that the review is less about condemning and more about learning. It is corrective, not annihilative, and it invariably aims toward reintegration within the divine community. 2 pastoral implications arise. First, the life review image can be a powerful motivator for ethical living now. The idea that our choices reverberate into the soul's memory invites accountability. Second, Cayce's language suggests consolation. Deaths are transitions, and many who pass experience reunion, correction, and guidance. For those grasped by grief, this can be an opening to hope. For those cautious about metaphysical certainty, it can be treated as comforting metaphor backed by a body of experiential reports. Let us now face addiction, a theme Cayce often reframed as spiritual disconnection. Addiction in the Cayce materials and in many modern therapeutic frameworks is less a moral failing than a symptom of separation from self, from community, and from the vibrational center of love Cayce identified with Christ consciousness. Case vignettes in the archives and many modern ministries that integrate spiritual care with medical treatment show recovery as a 4-fold process: remembrance, surrender, replacement, and service. Remembrance, reawakening memory of the self as need for relationship and vocation.
Dreams that reconnect someone to gifts, perhaps a flying dream or a Christ-centered visitation, can reignite a sense of purpose that undercuts the appeal and addictive numbing. Surrender, a turning toward help, spiritual, relational, and medical. Cayce's readings often urged prayerful surrender as part of recovery, reminding readers that spiritual assistance does not erase responsibility. Replacement, creating new patterns of daily living. Practical steps include ritualized morning and evening practices, brief attunement, journaling, community check-ins, and learning embodied coping skills. Service, the final stage, is outward-directed living. The archives show that gifts deepen when used in service. Recovery stabilizes when a person shifts identity from consumer of comfort to producer of compassion.
In practical terms, if addiction is a concern for you or someone you love, use dreams as diagnostic tools, but do not rely on them as treatment. Seek clinical help and integrate spiritual practices under the guidance of licensed professionals. Cayce's readings complement modern care by addressing spiritual and moral dimensions, but they are not a substitute for medical or psychological treatment. Next, the principle commonly expressed in Cayce's work, ask and ye shall receive, reinterpreted as a law of vibration. Cayce taught that prayer and intention work like the tuning of an instrument. You cannot force a struck chord to sound like a different note. You must tune the instrument. In his terms, receiving is not a transactional bribe, but a transformation. Preparedness invites response. Practical application, cultivate readiness. Prayer that expects and aims to exploit is ineffective. Prayer that prepares the heart for action increases capacity. Begin with small tests. Ask for clarity on a specific question. Pursue the smallest possible action that aligns with the request, and watch how circumstances shift. This is not magical thinking. It is training, an integration of inner disposition and outward praxis. A short practical protocol for vibrational alignment. 1. Centering. 3. Slow breaths, focusing on the heart. 2. Intention. State the request in 10 words or less. Help me to know how to serve at work. 3. Readiness action. Name one tiny thing you will do today that aligns with that request. 4. Gratitude. End with a sentence of thanks, not for outcome, but for the opportunity to move. Over time, you will learn whether prayer shifts perception, invites people, or activates resources. If it does not, look again at the readiness action step. Are you preparing as you pray? We arrive now at the heart of this series, a robust activation plan for the M on the palm, how to move from noticing a symbol to living intentionally. The program we propose is practical, ethical, and designed for gradual embodiment. It is divided into immediate, 30-day, and 90-day practices, scaffolded so that insight becomes habit. Immediate, first week. Start a dream journal. Record the mood and 2 concrete details upon waking. This trains recall. Palm scan. 1 mindful observation of your dominant hand under daylight. Note whether you observe an M shape. Describe it without judgment. Community reach. Tell one trusted friend or mentor what you are exploring and invite accountability. 1 compassionate action. Pick one person to help in a small, practical way in the next 48 hours. 30-day rhythm. Daily attunement, 10 minutes, a simple morning practice, breath, brief prayer for Christ-centered guidance, reading of a short passage that inspires service, then a 2-minute visualization of the day's service. Weekly pattern journal, once a week synthesize your dream notes and waking observations.
Look for repeated symbols, recurring strengths, and patterns of withdrawal or attraction. Learning micro goal. Pick one short course, book, or local class that develops a gift suggested by your dreams. Listening skills, basic pastoral care, introductory sound healing, or a medical first aid course if your dreams trend toward hands-on healing. Service commitment. Find a place to serve at least twice in the month, a soup kitchen, hospice, youth program, or phone companion service. 90-day cultivation, the deeper work. Mentorship. Secure a mentor or small group with oversight, someone who can give honest feedback about fruit and ethics. Skill development. Enroll in a structured program related to your gift. Chaplaincy training, trauma-informed care, counseling basics, or responsible energy work supervised by licensed practitioners. Public practice. Begin offering your gift in a supervised setting, prayer teams, hospice chaplain rounds, or community workshops, keeping records and seeking peer review. Reflective review. At the end of 90 days, write a 4-part reflection. What stayed? What changed? What boundaries were needed? How did service shape the gift? Embedded within this plan is a short guided attunement suitable for daily use. It takes less than 5 minutes and is explicitly Christ-friendly but non-denominational in language. Guided attunement, optional. Close your eyes and breathe slowly. In for 4, out for 6. Place your hand lightly over your heart. Offer a single simple invocation. Christ of love, steady me. Imagine a gentle light at your chest that expands outward to fill the room. Breathe into the light.
Ask for one small insight that will help you serve today. Wait gently. Notice the first impression, a phrase, color, or feeling. Thank silently and offer one small act you will do because of it. Breathe 3 times and open your eyes. Use this attunement as the daily readiness action anchor. Over weeks, small impressions will cohere into clearer direction. We must return to ethics. Cayce's archive is clear. Gifts must be stewarded with accountability, humility, and love. Several practical guardrails are essential. 1. Seek supervision. If you practice healing, prophecy, or mediumship, operate within communities that offer assessment and oversight. No one should practice alone where people's lives are at stake. 2. Test everything by fruit. Does this gift reduce suffering? Does it build community? Does it increase the capacity for justice? If the answer is no, reassess. 3. Beware of fame and profit traps. Cayce explicitly warned against using gifts to aggrandize self. Keep transparency about finances and motives, and return offerings to community support and service whenever possible. 4. Protect boundaries, both yours and others. Healing can create dependency. Prophetic insight can be misused. Maintain professional boundaries and refer to licensed helpers when appropriate.
5. Continue theological balance. When Cayce's claims about past lives or Atlantis conflict with your core convictions, hold them as interpretive models rather than coercive doctrine. Keep Christ-centered love as your hermeneutic. To further ground these ethical principles, consider 2 extended Cayce examples from the archives that illustrate both the promise and the danger of gift without discipline. Case 1, James Thompson, composite drawing on Cayce readings. James dreamed frequently of water, and waking found himself sought by neighbors for small healings, relief of headaches, calmer sleep, emotional reprieves. He began to believe he was uniquely gifted until a season of burnout and poor boundaries left him physically ill and relationally isolated. Reading number 115211 and subsequent counseling readings urged a recalibration, daily discipline, accountability to elders, and formal training. Over 3 years, James learned to channel his gift into supervised hospice work, where his ministrations became steady and sustainable. The turning point was not a miracle, but a practice, regular rest, a mentor's correction, and service within a team. Case 2, Martha Johnson. Early dreams of crystalline halls and instruments suggested an affinity for vibrational work. Without supervision, Martha experimented with technologies and groups that promised dramatic results. When a community ethics issue arose, she found herself unprepared and ashamed. A reading in the archives, see reading number 25468, pressed her to return to service. Her talents were not for spectacle, but for the alleviation of anxiety in others. Martha redirected her study toward music therapy used in clinical settings and partnered with hospital programs. Her gift persisted, but now it was integrated, accountable, and humble. These stories show a central conviction in Cayce's material. Gifts grow through ordinary disciplines. We close our practical and doctrinal arc with a consolidated diagnostic checklist you can use to assess whether your life resonates with the M emblem. Treat it as a reflective instrument, not a test. M checklist, interpretive. Mission. Do you feel a persistent vocational pull toward a role that serves others? Do friends often describe you as having a calling? Memory. Do you experience uncanny affinities for places, crafts, languages, or instruments not explained by upbringing? Manifestation. Do your intentions often translate into practical results when you pair them with disciplined action? Ministry. Are you naturally drawn to organize, teach, heal, or advocate for groups in need? Magnetism. Do people find themselves calmed, redirected, or inspired by your mere presence? Mercy. Do you more often choose compassion over retribution, especially when it costs you something? If you answer yes to 2 or more items, consider the M to be an interpretive cue worth exploring with prayer, mentorship, and disciplined practice.
If you answer no widely, remember, many people carry mission without marked palmistry. The absence of a mark is not absence of call. Before we conclude, a quiet theological synthesis. Cayce's persistent theme is the primacy of love. The archive offers many metaphysical details, records of past lives, descriptions of planes of transition, and accounts of advanced civilizations, but all of these are subordinate to one measure. Does this knowledge increase our capacity to love and serve? Cayce's frequent call to Christ-centered living reforms any temptation toward spiritual spectacle. The Christ image for Cayce is not a metaphysical ornament, but the highest vibration by which everything is sorted. If your dreams, your gifts, and even the letter on your palm point you away from love, question them. If they move you toward mercy, justice, and humble service, they are worth cultivating.
Finally, an activation summons. Here is a compact, realistic plan you can begin tonight, designed to carry you from insight into habit. Tonight, start the dream journal. Perform the 5-breath attunement before sleep. Place your journal beside your bed with a pen. This week, complete the palm scan exercise. List 5 persistent life patterns and share your discoveries with one trusted person. This month, adopt the 10-minute daily attunement and volunteer once in a service setting. Complete one learning micro-goal. This quarter, find a mentor, begin structured training relevant to your gifts, and offer your practice in a supervised context. A final pastoral note. Some gifts surface with glamour, most surface with patience. The soul's memory is often slow and stubborn. You will not always feel ready. That is precisely the place where grace labors most generously. Remember the reading that asked for ordinary obedience more often than spectacular gift. In that ordinary obedience, an M becomes less a brand and more a battlement, a place where you stand to protect the vulnerable and to call others into the light. If you have been carrying a repeated dream, a persistent talent, or even a quiet curiosity about an M in your hand, let this be a beginning. Test what resonates against Christ-like fruit, gather companions, and begin small. The archive that brought us these stories contains thousands of readings precisely because the spiritual life is a long apprenticeship. Your part is simple. Pay attention, prepare your heart, and serve. We close with one invitation. If your nights have been speaking and you want to join a conversation shaped by curiosity, compassion, and accountability, share a short note in the comments. Tell us one image from a recurring dream and whether you notice any pattern in your waking life that echoes it. If you have seen an M on your palm, tell us what it stirred in you. We read every story with care, and this community is where insights grow into practice. May the memory of your soul meet you with mercy.
May the gifts you carry be sanctified in service. May the image of Christ steady your sight, so that each dream becomes a path, and every path leads you to love.